This year in Minnesota, one of the biggest issues on the ballot is voter ID.
In Minnesota, the system is so fundamentally corrupt. And by that I mean it encourages corruption by saying you can vouch for somebody. You don't need to have a utility bill. If you walk into a voting place the day of the vote, you can register somebody else and vouch for them. Oh, trust me, they're good. And you can cast a ballot. It is ripe for abuse.
You have to show an ID to get on an airplane. You have to show an ID to attend a political event. Why should you not have to show an ID when you vote?
Something as important as voting in this country, we certainly want to be sure that all the people that have a right to vote get to vote, and those are the people that vote.
Opponents of the amendment do not think it's a good solution.
I understand the impulse to want to make sure that we don't have fraud in the polls. Ultimately, I come down on the side of those who suggest that it's not necessary to get the ID of every person who shows up there. It's not worth the cost to our constitutional, our state constitution.
I think there's a much more efficient way to do it. I know there's some talk about maybe having computers there at the polling place and having maybe the SOS feed into it and the DMV feed into it, where there we can look up, are you able to vote? We could pull up their picture even and say, this is who you are, okay. And I think that'd be more cost efficient than trying to get everybody an ID.
Some on both sides believe politics are involved.
I do think that it's revealing that there is video of some party operatives in another state who have said, you know, if we do this, we put a check mark in the, you know, we're doing this, we're influencing the election.
Frankly, one party I think stands to gain a lot if voter ID is not enacted, because it allows for voter fraud. They found a lot of cases in Minnesota last election cycle as a result of it. I think I heard they found 5,000 people, dead people, registered to vote in Florida.
The goal of the amendment is to cut down on these types of fraud.
Well, the fraud that's been shown in Minnesota is with felons. Having an ID isn't going to help because it doesn't list if you're able to vote or not if you're a felon on your driver's license.
We know there's abuse out there, and if you don't think just a little cheating matters, consider Senator Franken, who was obviously behind by some 700 votes on election night, and through all of the recounts, through the canvassing panel, through the county recounts, through the courts, somehow at every turn, miraculously, he gained votes until he was up by about 300. And by the way, he goes in and casts what some people call the 60th vote for Obamacare.
Many opponents of the amendment believe that it is discriminatory.
My grandma, who has cancer, hasn't driven since 2008. And so she doesn't need to drive. She doesn't have an ID. My grandpa takes care of all those important information, takes care of the bills, but she does want to vote. But now it doesn't pay for her to go and get a driver's license just to vote. She doesn't travel or anything else, so she doesn't really need her ID for anything but voting. That's hard for her because she'd have to go through so much other work to now get this driver's license.
I don't know if it's discriminatory or racist. I think it has been used. Techniques like this have been used in discriminatory and racist ways in the past. I don't know that the supporters of the amendment are necessarily trying to be discriminatory or racist.
If you don't have an ID, is that making that you're racist because the merchant won't let you write a check? It doesn't make sense. That's just an argument. It's a straw man argument. The fact is that they don't want voter ID because it allows for tinkering, if you will, with the voting process.
It's not onerous at all. Indeed, the Supreme Court in the Indiana case ruled just a few years ago that voter ID is not voter suppression. It is not too big an obstacle. You know, people think, well, I have a right to vote. You have a right to vote if you are qualified to vote. If you're not qualified to vote, then if you vote anyway, you dilute my vote. So I'm being disenfranchised. Of course it's the right thing to do, and I think Minnesota will pass it.
In order for the amendment to pass, at least 50% of the votes have to be yes. And one note, any voter that does not vote on this specific issue, their vote will automatically be counted as no. At the Minnesota State Capitol, John Foss, Hastings Community TV News.